the dark, and I'm right in the middle mark. I'm just in the tear of everything that rides below the surface. And I watch from a distance 17. I'm short of the others' dreams of being golden and on top. It's not what you painted in my head. There's so much there instead of all the colors that I saw. We all are living in a dream, but life ain't what it seems when everything's a mess. And all these sorrows I have seen, they lead me to believe that everything's a mess. And I wanna dream, I wanna dream, leave me to dream. In the eyes of a teenage crystallized, oh, the prettiest of lights that hang the hallways of the home. And the cries of the strangers out at night that won't keep us up at night. We have the curtains drawn and closed. We all are living in a dream, but life ain't what it seems when everything's a mess. And all these sorrows I have seen, they lead me to believe that everything's a mess. And I wanna dream, I wanna dream, leave me to dream. I know all your reasons. Forgive me from seeing everything is actually a mess. But now I am leaving. All of us, we're only dreaming. Everything is actually a mess. We all are living in a dream, but life ain't what it seems when everything's a mess. And all these sorrows I have seen, they lead me to believe that everything's a mess. I wanna dream, I wanna dream, lead me to dream.
That's amazing. Guys, you know what's so wild to think about is what Jamie just sang about is the tension I think we all experience in life. That in life, every single one of us, we have these dreams. We dream of experiencing incredible things. We dream of being part of things that are much bigger than ourselves, transcendent. We dream of an incredible marriage with remarkable intimacy and trust. We dream of having those conversations with our son or with our daughter where there's just such connection. And it's such an incredible moment. We dream of being part of a family that could be described as a family of just genuine, unconditional love. We dream of great accomplishments. We dream of financial freedom. And we dream of just having peace in life. But the reality is is that reality does come smashing into those dreams, doesn't it? And when reality smashes into those dreams, it creates a mess. And all of a sudden we begin to doubt, are these dreams even possible? Can I attain these things I so desire in life? Is that even possible anymore? But isn't that just life? Isn't life full of dreams and full of messes? Isn't that how we would describe our lives? I mean, if you were to ask me, Buck, hey, you've lived 43 years, tell me about your life. Do you know how I would share my story? I would share my story in moments. I would tell you about the dreams and I would tell you about messes. I would tell you the story about when I was 14 years old and my father brought me to San Diego to play one of the greatest golf tournaments I'd played up until that point because golf was a big part of my life. And I remember after a practice round, my father brought me to this beach right here. And there was a massive cliff behind us and it was just my dad and I. And we swam in the ocean and oh my gosh, the waves were giant. And it was such a moment that my father was so present and he was there with me and for me. And we laughed together. We created memories together. Then we pulled out of the ocean and we sat on the beach. And together, without pretty much any words, we watched the sun set. And it was such a moment. It was a moment that I wish could last forever. But my father's also created some messes in my life. I remember when my dad came out after my mom and dad had this big old fight. Then my dad came right up to me and put his finger in my chest and he said, Buck, if your mother and I ever get divorced, it's your fault. It's your fault. That's created a mess in my life. If I was to share my life with you, I would share some moments when I was in high school and I signed my University of Houston golf scholarship. And it was such a surreal moment because I'd worked so hard in high school. I've sacrificed so much for this very moment. And I remember signing that with my mom and my dad next to me. And I was like, my entire college education is going to be paid for. Such a remarkable moment. If I was to share my life, I would talk about this girl right here. And her name is Jill. And she's beautiful. And I would share with you the moment that I met her. We were both working at Dell, and we went on this kind of non-sanctioned Dell fishing trip with about 20, 25 people. We went to Port Aransas, and I remember we got to Port Aransas about 2 in the morning. We had to get up at 5, so only about 3 hours of sleep left. And Jill and I were just alone, and it was just us, and we were standing in the ocean. And as we stood in the ocean, there were sparkles all around us. And I don't know if it was like flesh-eating bacteria or jellyfish. I have no idea what it was. But it was a moment. And there were sparkles, and I looked at her, and she looked at me, and we were like, wow. I said, maybe that's my girl. Maybe that's my girl. It's a moment. If I was to share my life, I'd tell you moments of every single one of my sons, all 5 of them, and when they were born. And I'm telling you, it was so surreal to watch them, to see them be born. I was like, oh my gosh, I remember my first son, Sam, and he came out and his nose was all smashed and his face was all swollen up. And I was like, whoa. But then I thought, that's my boy. That's my son. I mean, my chromosomes are in him. Like my life will carry on through him. It's an amazing moment. And if I was to share my life, I would share some moments with my mom. Amazing moments. And I would also share the moment when she was 58 years old, diagnosed with cancer. And I watched my mom take her last breath. And after she took her last breath, I put my ear on her chest. And all I wanted to do was just hear one more heartbeat. Just one more time. That's how we describe life, isn't it? If I ask you about your life and I said, hey, tell me about your 15 years, 18 years, your 30 years, 50 years, 80 years, whatever it is. You know how you would describe your life? You would describe your life in moments. That the moment you met him, the moment you met her, the moment you got married, and the moment you got divorced, the moment your son or daughter was born, the moment that you accomplished that thing that was so difficult, but man, you did it. And there was so much pride, and you were so proud of that moment. That's how we describe life, because life is described and defined by moments. So the question becomes, well, what is a defining moment? Because if defining moments shape our lives, if defining moments shape your story and my story, if defining moments are the very thing that shape our legacies that we'll look back on, then what is a defining moment? Well, if I had to put a definition to it, I'd say a defining moment is a short experience that is both memorable and meaningful. I mean, sometimes these defining moments are so quick. They happen so fast, but they're so meaningful. There's so much purpose in the moment. It's those moments that are surreal. It's those moments that you go, can this last forever? And it's so memorable. It's like this, just picture in our mind that's just frozen. And what's fascinating is that Chip and Dan Heath, they actually wrote a book about moments. It's called The Power of Moments. And they did all the research, and the research describes what makes up a moment. And there are four very specific things that research would say really make a defining moment in your life and mine. And the first thing is elevation. That moments of elevation, this is the idea that this moment rises above all the other moments. It's the cream at the top. It's that, you've had 100 conversations with your dad, but then that one conversation where he said the very thing you've always desired him to say, and it stuck with you. That's an elevated moment. That's what creates these defining moments. They go on to say it's moments of insight. Because you read that book, you read that blog, you listened to that sermon, you heard that teaching, you heard that professor. All of a sudden there was a point in your life where you pivoted. There was a point in life that you were going this way and you got some insight and you went, wow, and you moved in a different direction. It's the very thing that so many of your stories are made of. When you became a follower of Jesus Christ, when you prayed that prayer, when you said, God, I am inviting you in if you are who you claim to be, reveal yourself to me, and he will, and he did. And you put your trust and faith in him, that moment that you discovered Christianity and Jesus is really about good news and all the other surface stuff, all the other noise went away, and you saw Jesus for who he is, and your life changed. That was a moment of insight. It's a defining moment. It's moments of pride in the most positive ways. It's those moments you're so proud of what happened. You're so proud of that accomplishment. That you worked so hard and you got that achievement, you got that title, you got that, big reward, you got the medal. I mean, you got the trophy. These moments of pride, and this is one of the reasons why it's so difficult to throw away trophies, that you earned. These trophies that are meaningful, like, they've got cobwebs all over them. They're all like falling apart, and you're like, okay, I need to chunk this. And right before you throw it away, you're like, oh, should I? You know why? It's because you're so darn proud of that moment and all the work that went behind that. That's a defining moment. And defining moments are made up of connection. It's that, graduation party. It's that big ceremony. It was that big, memorial service. It was that big celebration you went to, and there were so many moments in that. But the reason those moments became defining moments is because of who was with you, because of who was on your right and your left, and that connection led to those moments. These four things are what really make up a defining moment. And so over the next several weeks, we're going to be talking about this. This is where we're going. We're going to unpack each one of those things, and we're going to talk about what does it really look like to create these things in our life. But for today, our discussion today, as we begin this whole thing, this is like chapter 1. This is like 101. This is just laying the foundation for where we're going in this incredible series. Today, what I want you to think about for a second is what if? What if it's possible for you to create defining moments in your life? What if it's possible to actually see those dreams that you so dream of actually realized? What if there's something we can all do, regardless if you're a Christian or not? What if there's something we can do to actually capture and create defining moments that really shape our stories and shape our legacies in our life? Well, the good news, guys, is there's actually something we can do. There's something that we can all do to kind of open up the adventure of life. There's something we can do to actually get the things that we so desire, this clarity and this meaning and purpose in life. There's something every single one of us can do. And the question becomes, well, what is that? How is that even attainable? Well, the good news is that today we're going to hear how that's attainable. The good news is we're going to hear from somebody today that is an older gentleman that is incredibly, incredibly wise, that has so much life experience, and kind of looked back on their life experience and was like, okay, let me tell you some things I've learned. And he's going to show us a way forward today. And if this person was alive today, this person would be about 3,400 years old. They'd be pretty old, you know? And this person's name is Moses. Moses. I mean, Moses is an incredible story. If you're not familiar with Moses, you know, maybe you've heard him in the whole, you know, Charlton Heston movie, you know, the whole Moses thing, you know, Charlton Heston, let my people go, Pharaoh, you know, that one, the beard and the whole thing. He had some soul glow or something in his hair, because if you saw the movie, his hair shined, didn't it? It's amazing. I was like, man, I need some of that stuff. Anyways, that was, you know, that's Moses. Moses had an incredible story as a little baby. I mean, he should have died. He should have. But through a miraculous event, he was actually adopted into the most powerful man in the world's home. His name was Pharaoh. And he was brought into the kingdom of Pharaoh. He was raised in their educational ways, in the most sophisticated education of the time. I mean, incredible experiences he got. And as he got older, he began to see his people, the nation of Israel, because he was an Israelite, and he was adopted into Pharaoh's home, and he sees that the nation of Israel is in slavery, is oppressed. And most theologians would say there's probably 1 million, maybe 2, maybe 3 million slaves. And Moses says, man, I got to do something about it. Long story short, he leads 1 million plus people out of slavery. And imagine leading 1 million plus people. The things he got to learn, the things he got to see. And Moses got to see the miraculous. Moses got to see the laws, the physical laws of our universe, the laws of physics. He got to see those in God's perspective. He got to hear from God directly. Incredible life. And Moses, at the end of his life, kind of looks back, and he writes several different letters throughout the scriptures. And in one of those letters, he kind of writes this idea, or gives us this insight into, is it possible to create defining moments? And he says, oh, absolutely. And this is the way Moses says it. He starts this way, and he wants to give us clarity. Moses says this. He says, Lord, you've been our dwelling place throughout all generations. Before the mountains were born, or you brought forth the whole world from everlasting to everlasting. You're God. Now, Moses' point here is he's saying, guys, listen, purpose in life is not found in the bookends of life. Purpose in your life is not found, hey, I'm born and then I die. It's not found there. Purpose in life is only found in a transcendent, uncaused God. That's where purpose is found. Because Moses' point is, guys, no God, no purpose. And if you're intellectually honest and you don't believe in a God, I love the fact that you're here, but if you're intellectually honest, you know this. You know that if it's random, time, and chance, that's all it really is, then you may tell yourselves things that make you feel better about purpose and about meaning in this world. But if you're intellectually honest, you know that there is zero meaning, zero purpose. It's all random if there is no God. And Moses' point is to say, guys, we long for purpose in life. That should tell us something. And God gives us purpose. Okay, Moses, thank you for that. Where are you going with this? And Moses says, hang in there. And he continues on and he says, you turn people back to dust, saying, return to dust, you mortals. And his whole point with this is to say, listen, in life, regardless of what you have and what you accomplish, we all go through the same door at the end of our life. Regardless of your accolades, regardless of your titles, regardless of your success, your academic success, your business success, how big your bank account is, how many houses you may have or boats you may have, how many titles, how much notoriety, how much fame on the social media world you may have, it doesn't matter. Because at the end of the day, we all go through the exact same door, and that door is called death. 100% of us will. Well, Moses, this is fairly depressing. Is there a point to this? And Moses would say, hang in there with me because I'm making a point. This is so important to get clarity on. And he continues. He says, 1,000 years in your sight, talking about God, are like a day that's just gone by or like a watch in the night. And this is so interesting because he's saying from God's perspective, he's trying to teach us from God's perspective. Did you know 1,000 years is like a day? You know, from God's perspective, 1,000 years, it gets even worse than that. It's like a watch in the night. That's like a 3 to 4 hour period of time. That fast. That your life, if you were to see it clearly, that your life goes like that. That your life is like one blink. That's as quick as your life. Now, for us, sometimes that's hard to understand, especially the younger you are. I mean, for students, I remember when I was 16 years old, I lived my life like I had unlimited time. Like, I intellectually knew, or I would pause from time to time and go, I know I'm going to die, But then I would make all kinds of decisions and live my life in such a way to go, hey, I'll make up for it. Hey, I've got plenty of time. Hey, I'll make up for it. And that's how I lived as a 16-year-old. But now it's 43. I'm very aware of my mortality, you know? In fact, a few times, you know, I've tried, you know, when I go to bed, I'll lay down and I'm just trying to relax and go to sleep. And then all of a sudden, this thought will hit me. And the thought will be like, you're going to die. And I'm like, what? What is that? And all of a sudden I start thinking and my mind starts going and I'm like, I am. I mean, I'm halfway through. I mean, oh my gosh, time is running out. And I become acutely aware of my mortality. Moses' point is, guys, your life is so incredibly quick. And then he says, our days may come to 70 years or 80. This was written 3,000 years ago. Look at this insight. 70 to 80 years, if our strength endures, yet the best of them are but troubles and sorrow, for they quickly pass and we fly away. Exactly what Jamie just sang about. That, hey, as hard as you may try and as much as you may strive, you're going to see some dreams happen. But the reality is probably you'll see an equal amount of messes. And sometimes in life, you'll see even more messes. And therefore, it's kind of like, what's the point? What's the point? And our question to Moses at this point, because it feels kind of depressing. Moses, what do we do? I mean, Moses, you're trying to say, hey, there is no purpose outside of God. Okay, check, got that. You're trying to tell me we all have the end, you know, to go through the same door regardless of what you accomplish in life. You're trying to get me to understand and get clarity around the fact that my life is so quick. And at the end of the day, there's really not much purpose in the bookends of life. Okay, I got that. What do you want us to do? What's the point? And then he says it. Then he gives us this incredible insight in the form of a prayer. And he says, God, teach us. Please, teach us to number our days. Well, why does he need to teach us? Because we don't live like this. Teach us because oftentimes we make decisions in life like we have unlimited time to make it all up. Oftentimes, we live our lives in such a way to go, hey, mortality, yeah, one day, someday, but we don't have it front and center in our lives. And so he says, God, teach us, teach me to number my days so that we may gain a heart of wisdom, so that I may have eyes to see clearly, so that I may pursue things that are wise. My relationships make decisions that are wise. If I can keep this in perspective, it gives me wisdom today. If we had to summarize this, perhaps what Moses is getting at is when we see life clearly, we live life purposely. When you and I number our days and we can see life clearly, it gives us so much more intentionality, meaning, purpose. We pursue things that are important. We say no to things that aren't important. And guys, we see this in everyday life. I mean, think about this. This week, a friend of mine emailed me. I hadn't heard from her in 10 years. I used to work with her at Dell. She helped start North Point when we first initially started. An amazing, amazing person. She emailed and she said, Buck, you're not going to believe it. I'm getting married. And she was so excited because she's wanted to get married for a long time. And so she's like, hey, we're doing all these things. It's going to be about 80 days before we get married. And she was saying, can you officiate this? Can you officiate? And I thought to myself this week, I said, there it is. She numbered her days, 80 days before she's getting married. And so she's reaching out to me to go, who's going to officiate? She's thinking about, where's the setting going to be? Hey, I need to rent this place. Hey, I need to get the dresses. Hey, we need to get the tuxedos or whatever you're going to wear. We need to get with the bakery and what they're going to bake and the cake and the whole thing. We need to invite our friends. And all of a sudden, because she's numbered her days, she's living intentionally day after day after day because she knows this day is coming. If you're in business, you've done this all the time. I mean, a big deal that could change your future or change the direction of your company. I mean, what do you do if you know, hey, in 2 weeks, I'm going to have this prospective client that's coming in? Man, this is a big moment. You get all your spreadsheets ready. You get all your competition in order. You get as familiar as you've ever been with your products and what you're able to do, and you think about how you're going to position it. You begin to live purposefully and intentionally. And even when it comes to big events like Summerfest, guys, over the last, 100 days or so, I mean, we've been planning for Summerfest. We know it's going to be hot, so we've been getting misters, and we've been getting all kinds of water and all kinds of, fun things that we're going to do. I mean, all this intentional work behind the scenes. Why? Because we knew our days were numbered. And perhaps the greatest example of this, the best example I've seen, in recent time, came from a book I read recently. And it was a book by a man named Eugene O'Kelly. And his book is called Chasing Daylight. It's one of New York Times bestsellers. I would highly, highly recommend this book. And Eugene's story goes like this. Eugene was a 53-year-old man. He was the CEO of a $4 billion accounting firm with over 20,000 employees. Talk about getting to the top of what he did. He was at the top. And he goes to the doctor, and the doctor says, Eugene, I don't know how to tell you this, but you have an inoperable brain tumor. You've got 3 months to live, approximately about 100 days. And in those 100 days, he writes this memoir. He writes this book. And he starts the whole book with this line. Look at this. He starts, I was blessed. What? Yeah, I was blessed. I was told I had 3 months to live. 2 teenage daughters, married for 17 years, all the resources you could imagine to enjoy the second half of his life. And you say you're blessed because you have 3 months to live? How can you say this? And he goes on in the book to say, this is how I can say it. He goes, it forced me to think seriously about my own death, which meant I was forced to think more deeply about my life than I'd ever done before. So Eugene, as you thought about your life more deeply because you numbered your days, now all of a sudden this day and that day, it's very intentional. What'd you do differently? And he tells us. He says, so we decided then and there to focus on creating meaningful moments, powerful moments, perfect moments, defining moments that we could shape or share with the important people in Gene's life. These perfect moments included letters, phone calls, walks in the park, fabulous meals, and even intimate conversations from a hospital bed. A perfect moment doesn't have to be a pristine event on the water or in a fancy restaurant. Defining moments don't have to cost you a single penny. They can be simple. And that's exactly, he says that. It can be as simple as a shared glance or just taking a step back to laugh at yourself. And then he says this, as a result, I experienced more perfect moments and perfect days in 2 weeks than I had in the last 5 years, or than I probably would have in the next 5 years, had my life continued the way it was going before my diagnosis. And then he wraps up and says, I felt like I was living a week in a day, a month in a week, a year in a month. I got more out of life than I'd ever gotten out of life. I got more out of my friendships and relationships and my marriage and with my 2 daughters and with my colleagues. And I got more out of life than I'd ever gotten in life because I numbered my days. So, let's just think about this a second. For you, for me. What would you do differently if you knew you had 100 days to live? If today you got that diagnosis, you have 100 days to live because Eugene only lived 100 days and then he died. What if that was for you? What would you do differently? And I know in your marriage, you got these things going on. And I know there's difficulties, and if she would, if he would, if they would, that whole thing. I get that. I'm married. I get life. But what would you say to her differently? How would you talk with her differently? What would you want her to know about the depths of your heart and your soul? How would you talk to him differently? How would you engage him and approach him differently? What would you want him to know from the depths of your soul? If you had 100 days to live, what would you want to do with your son, your daughter? If you had 100 days to live, how about your friends, your closest friends? How about your mom or your dad? If you had 100 days to live, what would you do with your time? And what would you stop doing with your time? That's such a waste of time. What would that look like for you? And if you had 100 days to live, what would your defining moments look like? Like specifically, what kind of conversations would you have? What would you do differently? What would you do more of? This week I thought about this, and I thought, gosh, I've thought about these things before, and you wrestle with this, and I've got some ideas here, but I thought to myself, Buck, if you had 100 days to live, what would you do? And so I began to write a lot of things down, and I began to think about, my relationships with my friends. And I just thought, gosh, with my friends, I'd probably spend a little bit more intentional time with them. I mean, I currently spend it, but I'd probably let them know intentionally that I think about them a lot more than I let them currently know. I think about some of my best friends all the time, and I pray for them specifically, but I just simply don't let them know that. Every now and then I will, but I thought, if I had 100 days to live, I'd just let them know. And I would spend more intentional time with them. I'd spend intentional time around the table and just eating some fun meals and just talking about life, talking about marriage, talking about our kids, talking about the ups and downs, the messes and the dreams. And I'd sit outside on the porch and drink a fine glass of wine with them and just talk about just life and look at God's creation. If I had 100 days to live, I think I'd write more thank you notes. You know, it's a current practice. I write thank you notes all the time, but I think I'd write a little bit more. I think I'd write a thank you note to a man named Peter Horn. Peter Horn was a mentor of mine back in 2001. In 2001, I was trying to figure out what it looked like to live for Christ because I'd lived for the world for a long time, and I thought, okay, I've done what the world has asked me to do, and life is getting more complicated and more complicated. Maybe there's a different way. And so I went to the church, and I just said, hey, I'd like to figure out what it looks like to follow Christ. Can you help me? And I met this guy named Peter, and Peter said, Buck, I'll teach you what that looks like, but you've got to meet me at 5:30 a.m. in the morning, Tuesday mornings at Denny's. And I was like, really? I said, all right. So I set my alarm. I met him 5:30 in the morning every Tuesday morning for 2 years. And he shaped my life. And I would not be where I am today without him. I just want to write a thank you note and say, Peter, I just want to thank you for investing the most valuable thing that you'll never get back in my life, time. I think when it comes to my sons, the things I do more of, I think, I'd have more intentional moments. I think about Jonathan. He's a 10-year-old. He's a twin, one of the twins. And I think I'd take Jonathan to Gaddyland more often. Because Jonathan all the time, almost every week, he's like, Dad, take me to Gaddyland. Take me to Gaddyland. I love Gaddyland. And I'm like, that's where he's at. And I would take him there, and he loves the claw machines. The big claw machine. He loves seeing that. And I would just stand there next to my son, Jonathan, and I've done this a number of times. So I would just do this more. And I would just watch him and his radiant smile and his little features and just think, wow, no words have to be spoken here, but this is a defining moment. I would take Michael on road trips because Michael loves to talk. Man, he's got a million ideas. His mind is going 1,000 miles an hour. I'd take my son, Timbo, fishing more. Take him to the greatest spots that I'm aware of and just sitting there shoulder to shoulder with my son. I would take Luke to a PGA golf tournament or several PGA golf tournaments and just he and I stay the night in a hotel, hang out, watch golf, and create those moments I was present, more of those moments. And I'd take Sam, my oldest son. I'd take him to an NFL football game, maybe a Dallas Cowboys game, maybe a Denver Broncos game, and we would spend the night, and I'd just be shoulder to shoulder. I'd be present with him. And I would spend more of those moments with my sons. If I had 100 days to live when it comes to Jill, I thought, man, I think I'd probably be more courageous with my emotions. I've learned a lot about my emotions, and I got a long way to go. But I think there's so many times I think about her, and I go, wow, she's stunning. Wow, look at the way she loves our sons. Wow, look at the way she loves me. Look at the way she follows Christ. Look at the way she loves people. I think sometimes I'd be a little bit more courageous with my emotions and just hug her a little bit more and bring her to my chest and just kiss her and just say, babe, you are amazing. And what you do with our sons and what I see is remarkable. I think I'd probably hug more. I'm not a hugger. But I think if I had 100 days to live, I'm starting to understand why I don't hug. I'd probably hug people more because I really love people. And I think I'd hug them a little bit more. That's me. And guys, I don't know how much time I have. Maybe I've got a day. Maybe I've got a week. Maybe I've got 100 days. I just don't know. Maybe I've got, 50 years. Who knows? But what I know is there's something I can do today, right now, in the present. I don't have to go search. I don't have to go create these moments. It's just right here waiting for me to be intentional. There's something I can do today to create defining moments that will shape my legacy in a way I so desire it to be shaped. And that's true for you. So, for you, if you had 100 days, what would your defining moments look like? What would you do differently that you're currently not doing? What would you say to him or her? What would you do? And if you're here today and you're not a follower of Christ, I'm just telling you, I so desire you to do this. Because if you choose to number your days exactly what Moses is teaching us and you're intentional with that and you write it down, I'm just telling you, it honestly will make your life better. It will lead to the very things you desire. You desire that more intimate moment in marriage. You desire those more relational space with your best friends. You desire to kind of look back after a week and go, woo, that week felt like a month. Man, I lived so much life this week. This month felt like a year. What was the difference? What was the difference in your life? Is you became intentional. You decided on this day to write something down and to go pursue the things that are most meaningful in life. And if you're here today and you're a follower of Christ, I'm so grateful you're here. But come on, guys. This is what we're called to do. As a follower of Christ, this is what we're called to do. And if we choose to do this, not only will it give us more clarity, more purpose, more meaning, more significance, capture the time that we have, but I'm telling you, it'll lead to depth. If you want depth, if you want to go, oh, I want to go deep, this is going deep, baby. This is sitting down, taking the time, being intentional. You know what to do. It's now time to do it. Because it'll create defining moments in your life. And defining moments make up your story. Defining moments make up our legacies that we look back on. And today, as we walk out, there's something every single one of us can do to be able to make our dreams become a reality. Let me pray for us. Father, I think there's a whole lot that can be said. And so I just want to say thank you for loving us. Thank you for giving us purpose. And my request today, in light of our discussion, is would you please, for every single one of us, in your most unique, creative way, would you please teach us to number our days so that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Trust you with that, Father. In Jesus' name, amen. Guys, thanks again for being here. Just to let you know, in about 30 minutes, just in a few minutes, Summerfest is going to start. There's maps and great information outside. You guys have a great time. I'll see you next week.